My name is Irene Stewart. I'm 35 years old, single, no children, and until recently I didn't realize how much of my life had been quietly assigned to other people. I've never been sentimental about birthdays. Growing up, they were more administrative than celebratory, a store-bought cake, a few stiff smiles for the camera, maybe a gift if my parents remembered between bills and school schedules. So when I turned 35 this year, I didn't expect anything meaningful. Honestly, I wouldn't have minded if the day passed unnoticed. But my younger sister Melanie insisted. She pitched it as casual. A small family dinner, nothing fancy, just us. She even offered to host it at her place, her newly renovated house, the one she loved, reminding everyone had been saved, thanks to my help during a particularly convenient financial emergency. I work in tech, cybersecurity. I started coding in college, climbed quietly, invested carefully. I don't show it off. I don't talk numbers. But somehow being stable turned me into the default solution for everyone else's instability. I paid my bills. I planned ahead. And in my family, that translated into availability. The dinner was set for Saturday night. I arrived with a bottle of wine and the practice half smile you wear when you already know you're walking into a room where you're valued more for what you provide than who you are. Melanie opened the door with exaggerated cheer apron on, playing hostess like she was auditioning for a lifestyle blog. "There she is," she said brightly. "Birthday girl. Come in, everyone's already here." Everyone meant my parents comfortably retired and permanently neutral. My older brother Brian, who still hadn't repaid the emergency car loan from 3 years ago. His wife Janine, who only spoke to me to brag or request favors. Melanie's husband Rick, who avoided eye contact unless the topic was investments or taxes. And the kids, nieces and nephews ranging from toddler chaos to preteen indifference, half of them glued to tablets I'd bought last Christmas. Dinner itself was fine. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, small talk. I laughed when expected, nodded when appropriate. The whole time, though, there was an unspoken tension in the room, like everyone was waiting for me to do something. Then dessert arrived. A homemade chocolate cake, slightly crooked candles, an off-key rendition of Happy Birthday that felt obligatory rather than warm. I smiled, made a wish I didn't believe in, reached for the knife to cut slices for the kids. That's when my 12-year-old nephew, Mason Bryan's son, spoke without looking up from his phone. "She's just the family wallet. That's what Mom calls her." The room went silent. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then came the laughter. Not awkward laughter, not uncomfortable chuckles. Real laughter. From Brian. From Janine. Even from Melanie. My mother offered a half-hearted scold that didn't land. My father cleared his throat and went back to his coffee like this was a rerun he'd already seen. Janine wiped tears from her eyes. Kids say the funniest thing she said, still smiling. I didn't laugh. I didn't speak. I smiled. Just one small practice smile, the kind you perfect after years of swallowing words that never would have mattered anyway. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and began tapping quietly while cake was passed and conversation resumed like nothing had happened. Because in that moment, something settled inside me. They didn't see me. I wasn't Irene. I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was infrastructure. I was the backup plan. The account they never checked but always relied on. I sat there silently scrolling through accounts, insurance, streaming services, phone plans, credit cards, all the invisible threads I'd been holding without ever being thanked. When dinner ended, I thanked Melanie for hosting, and walked to the table. I placed a small box beside the cake, taped shut. On the lid, written in black marker, "Figure it out." Then I left. No speeches, no confrontation, no goodbye. Something had shifted quietly, permanently. And for the first time in a very long time, I was done giving. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm, no buzzing phone, just that strange low hum in my chest, the kind you feel after something irreversible has happened, even if the world hasn't caught up yet. I sat on the edge of my bed, feet flat against the hardwood floor, staring at the faint scratch near the dresser I'd meant to fix for months. Part of me expected chaos. Missed calls, angry texts, someone demanding an explanation. Another part of me knew better. In my family, concern never arrived first. Inconvenience did. By the time I brewed my coffee, my phone was still silent. It wasn't until mid-afternoon that the first message came through. A text from Brian. "Hey, Netflix isn't working. Did you change something?" I stared at the screen for a long second. Not happy birthday. Not are you okay. Not even what was that last night. Just Netflix. I locked my phone and walked away. An hour later, the family group chat lit up a space I'd stayed in out of habit more than affection. Melanie, is the family phone plan down? I can't make calls. Rick followed with an eye roll emoji. Wi-Fi at Mom and Dad's isn't working either. Thought it was the router, but maybe billing. There it was. The first crack. Like they'd all hit the same invisible wall at once and were now tapping around it, trying to find the hole I'd always left open for them. Still no one called. Not to ask why I left, not to check in. Just irritation, confusion, and mild annoyance that the machine had stopped working. I didn't respond to a single message. I turned my phone face down and let it vibrate uselessly against the mattress. That night around 8, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Melanie standing there, arms crossed so tightly it looked like she was holding herself together by force alone. Her cheeks were flushed, not from the cold. "You canceled the phone plan," she said flatly. I stepped aside and gestured toward the couch. "Come in." She didn't. She stood in the center of my living room like a detective surveying a crime scene. "This isn't funny, Irene." "It wasn't meant to be," I said. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, deliberately slow. "You left without a word," she continued. "You didn't even blow out the candles." "You seem to have managed without me," I replied calmly. I figured I'd return the favor. She blinked, thrown off by the lack of heat in my voice. "Look," she said softer now. "Mason was just joking. He's 12. He doesn't know what he's saying." I raised an eyebrow. "That's interesting, because he knew it well enough to quote you." Her face twitched just for a second, a flinch she couldn't hide. "You're being petty," she said after a pause. "People rely on you. You can't just pull the plug on everything without warning." "Can't I?" I leaned against the counter. "Because I did, and the world didn't end." "Our lives did," she snapped. "Sure," I said, "but the planet's still spinning." Silence stretched between us. Then she sighed, rolling her eyes. "You've always been dramatic." That one landed heavier than she probably intended. I laughed once, sharp, humorless. "Right. I'm dramatic. Not the family that treats me like a shared account. Not the sister who calls me a wallet when she thinks I'm not listening." "We never said that," she said quickly. "Mason did. He misunderstood. He quoted it," I said flatly, verbatim. That shut her up. After a beat, she tried again. "We're family, Irene. Families help each other. That's how it works." I set my glass down. "Then help yourselves." Her eyes widened. For the first time, it seemed to register that I wasn't bluffing, that I wasn't going to fold, apologize, or quietly restore everything. "Fine," she snapped, grabbing her coat. "Play the martyr. Just don't expect anyone to come crying to you when they figure it out." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. But she was wrong about one thing. They were already crying. Just not to me. Over the next few days, the chaos spread. Janine called from an unfamiliar number, probably Brian's, and left a voicemail that was half complaint, half guilt trip. "This is getting ridiculous," she said. "You're punishing all of us over a stupid joke. The kids can't even watch their shows." Then my mother called. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "your father and I can't access our prescriptions. The app won't let us log in." "I'm sure there's a paper option," I replied calmly. "Maybe Brian can help." A pause. "He's busy." "I'm sure he'll figure it out," I said and hung up. And then 2 days later, Brian showed up. He brought Mason with him. I didn't even open the screen door fully. I stood on the porch while Mason sat slouched in the passenger seat staring at his phone. "You humiliated us," Brian said. "Over a joke." "No," I corrected. "Over a pattern." "What pattern?" "Using me. Ignoring me. Mocking me. Acting like my money is an inheritance you're entitled to. That's not fair. You never paid me back for the car." He hesitated. "That was years ago." "You thought I forgot." He had no answer. "Don't take it out on the kids," he said finally. "They didn't do anything." "Mason did," I said, and I was 35. Silence. "I left you a box," I added. "You saw it." He nodded. That box had everything I said. Keys, passwords, accounts I closed, bills I was covering. I didn't disappear. I handed you the wheel. He swallowed. "We didn't know." "You never asked." He left without another word. And that's when I understood something important. They weren't angry I had been hurt. They were angry the tap had run dry. The tone shifted after Brian left. At first, it was outrage, sharp, indignant, loud. Accusations dressed up as concern. Texts that started with, "I can't believe you would," and ended with, "Family doesn't do this to each other." My phone buzzed constantly for a day, then 2, then slowly tapered off when they realized guilt wasn't working. That's when the bargaining began. Melanie texted me late one night, softer now. "Rick's hours got cut again. Could you maybe just keep the phone plan active until things stabilize?" My father left a voicemail the next morning, careful and measured. "Let's talk about a fair compromise. Brian even sent an actual email, formal and oddly polite, offering to start paying me back in monthly installments if that would help smooth things over. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one of them apologized. They just wanted the hole plugged. And then on a Wednesday afternoon, my bank called. At first, I thought it was routine, the usual automated fraud check, but the woman on the line sounded too alert, too careful. We flagged several failed login attempts on your account, she said. There were also multiple attempts to reset your password. My stomach tightened. From where? She gave me the location. Brian's neighborhood. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for a full minute before dialing his number. He answered on the third ring. I just wanted to check something he said before I could speak. His tone was casual, too casual. You tried to access my bank account, I said. A pause. I didn't think it would be a big deal, he muttered. I just wanted to see. You wanted to see how much money you were losing access to, I finished. He exhaled. Look, if you're cutting us off, we deserve to know what's been going on. How much you were spending. You tried to break into my account, I repeated slower this time. Well, if you just told us what you needed. You mean like you told your son I was the family wallet? Silence. If you wanted to work something out, he continued weakly, you could have just asked. I felt something go very still inside me. You didn't want to work anything out, I said coldly. You wanted to make sure the ATM wasn't completely dry. He hung up. That night I changed everything. Every password. Every security question. Two-factor authentication on every account. Credit frozen. Savings moved to a different bank. It wasn't paranoia, it was clarity. They weren't just careless. They were entitled. And that realization did something irreversible. I wasn't just stepping back anymore. I was stepping away. Over the next few days, the messages slowed, then stopped entirely. The silence was abrupt, almost violent in how complete it was. No more complaints, no more bargaining, no more demands. Just nothing. At first it felt like peace. Then it felt like abandonment. The house was too quiet. My phone stayed face down on the counter, untouched for hours at a time. Nights stretched long and heavy. I'd wake at 2 a.m, heart pounding for no reason, mind replaying scenes I couldn't change. Every holiday dinner where I picked up the check without hesitation. Every emergency payment sent within minutes of a request. Every time they looked surprised when I said no, like my existence only made sense when it was useful. I started scrolling through old photos one night, my thumb moving automatically. Birthdays, graduations, little league games. I was in all of them, but always in the background, behind the camera, holding purses, carrying gifts, writing checks. I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me how I was doing. That realization hit harder than the joke ever had. I stopped going to the gym, stopped cooking, let the dishes pile up in the sink, the laundry sit unfolded on the couch. My apartment felt like a waiting room, neat enough to function, but empty temporary. Work was the only thing keeping me upright. I threw myself into projects, volunteered for extra reviews, stayed late without complaint. My manager noticed, complimented my focus. I almost laughed. What he saw as dedication was really avoidance. Rock bottom didn't arrive with a crash. It crept in quietly. It was checking my phone on a Sunday night and realizing no one had texted me all weekend. It was overhearing a coworker talk about their niece's recital and realizing I hadn't been invited to Mason's birthday this year. It was walking past a family at the park and feeling like an outsider to the concept of unconditional love. One night, about 3 weeks after the dinner, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and stopped. I looked tired, pale, like someone waiting for permission to exist. And for the first time, the truth settled in. No one was coming. No apology, no realization, no moment where they'd suddenly see me as more than what I provided. If I kept waiting, I would keep shrinking. So that night I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened a blank notebook and wrote a list. Not things I paid for, not things I gave away, things that were mine. The list was short at first. My job, my condo, my books, my Saturday mornings, but it grew. My boundaries, my peace, my voice, my dignity, my name, Irene Stewart. Not the family wallet, not the one who always picks up the check. Just me. And that was the night everything stopped being about them. Once the anger burned itself out, what remained was silence. Not the peaceful kind you choose, the kind that settles in after something breaks and no one bothers to sweep up the glass. The family group chat stayed empty. No more missed calls, no half-hearted voicemails wrapped in concern that was really just inconvenience. At first I told myself it was temporary, that they were regrouping, cooling off, deciding who would reach out first. Days passed, then weeks, and no one did. The absence was loud in a way I hadn't anticipated. It echoed through my apartment late at night when the city sounds thinned out and there was nothing left to distract me. I'd catch myself glancing at my phone without realizing it, thumb hovering, waiting for a name that never appeared. I'd wanted distance. I'd needed it. I hadn't expected grief. Not for people exactly, but for the version of family I'd convinced myself existed. The one where my generosity was love, where my availability meant I mattered, where my silence had been mistaken for strength instead of erasure. Without the constant demands, my schedule opened up in unfamiliar ways. Weekends stretched wide and empty. I didn't know what to do with time that wasn't already spoken for by someone else's crisis. That's when the loneliness crept in. It wasn't sharp. It was dull and persistent, like a low-grade ache you keep forgetting about until you move the wrong way. I'd sit on the couch, scrolling aimlessly, open the fridge, and close it again, pace the apartment like I was waiting for instructions that never came. Sleep became unreliable. I'd fall asleep exhausted, only to wake at 2 or 3 in the morning, with my heart racing, mind replaying old conversations, old moments where I'd ignored the discomfort because saying something would have been inconvenient. One morning I found myself scrolling through old photos again. Not out of nostalgia this time, out of curiosity. I noticed patterns I had never really seen before. I was always present, always smiling, always useful, but never centered. I was the one taking pictures not in them, the one watching kids while others ate, the one handing over envelopes, passing cards, covering costs quietly. In dozens of photos spanning years, I couldn't find a single moment where anyone was looking at me. That realization sat heavy in my chest for days. Work became my refuge, not because I loved it more, but because it asked something clear of me. Problems to solve, systems to stabilize, outcomes I could measure. I stayed late, took on projects others avoided, volunteered for presentations no one wanted. My manager praised my focus. My coworkers joked that I was on fire lately. They didn't see the truth. I wasn't on fire. I was trying not to disappear. Rock bottom didn't arrive all at once. It revealed itself in small, quiet moments. Like realizing I hadn't spoken to another human being outside of work in 3 days. Like overhearing laughter in the hallway and feeling oddly disconnected from it. Like walking past a family in the grocery store, a mother adjusting her child's jacket, a father pushing the cart, and feeling a strange, hollow ache that had nothing to do with envy and everything to do with exclusion. One night, after another restless stretch of sleep, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and stopped. The overhead light was unkind. It showed everything I'd been avoiding. I looked tired, thinner, like someone who had been holding their breath for far too long. And something inside me finally snapped into focus. No one was coming to fix this. There would be no intervention, no heartfelt apology, no sudden realization on their part that they'd gone too far. If I waited for them to change, I would wait forever. That's when I pulled out a notebook I'd had tucked in a drawer for years, blank unused, a gift I'd never had time for. I sat at the kitchen table and opened to the first page. At the top, I wrote, "What is mine?" Not things I paid for, not obligations, not roles I'd been assigned without consent. Things that belonged to me alone. The list started small. My job, my home, my books, my quiet mornings. Then it grew. My time, my boundaries, my choices, my voice, my dignity. And finally, at the bottom of the page, I wrote my name. Irene Stewart. Not the fixer, not the fallback plan, not the family wallet. Just Irene. I stared at the page for a long time, feeling something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Resolve. And for the first time since the dinner, I didn't feel like I was losing something. I felt like I was about to take something back. Rebuilding didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic morning where I woke up transformed, no sudden burst of motivation that fixed everything. It started quietly, almost accidentally, with a single decision that felt insignificant at the time. I called an old friend. Her name was Laura. Someone I'd known in college before life turned into a series of obligations and emergencies that were never mine but somehow always became my responsibility. We hadn't spoken in years. Not because of conflict, just distance. The kind that grows when you're too busy being useful to everyone else to maintain anything real. I stared at her name in my contacts for a long time before hitting call. She answered on the second ring, surprised, but warm. Irene. Is everything okay? That question alone nearly undid me. We met for a drink that weekend. One drink turned into 3 hours. We talked about work, about aging parents, about things we'd wanted to do and never made time for. She laughed easily, listened fully. At one point, she leaned back and said, "You seem different, lighter." I hadn't felt lighter, but hearing it out loud made me wonder if maybe something had shifted without my permission. The next small change came on a Saturday morning. Instead of scrolling through my phone or waiting for someone to need something, I pulled my old camera out of the closet. I used to love photography landscapes light the quiet patience it required. Somewhere along the way, it had turned into a tool I only brought out at family events to capture memories for everyone else. I drove to a nearby state park alone. No schedule, no expectations, no one asking me to take a group photo or hold their bag. I spent hours there, photographing trees, water shadows, letting time stretch without filling it. When I got back to my car, I felt exhausted in the best possible way, the kind that comes from presence, not depletion. That was the first day I didn't feel like I was waiting for my life to resume. A week later, I signed up for a community class at the local library, digital art, something completely outside my comfort zone, the kind of thing I would have dismissed before as impractical or unnecessary. The first class I barely spoke, just listened, drew clumsy lines on a tablet I'd bought myself, not as a gift for anyone else, not as an emergency replacement, but because I wanted it. By the third session, I stayed after class to talk with a few people. We swapped book recommendations, complained about software updates. Someone mentioned a group dinner the following week and casually invited me along. No occasion, no obligation, just company. I started cooking again. Not rushed meals eaten standing at the counter, but real ones. Recipes I found online. Slow, deliberate prep. There was something grounding about chopping vegetables, tasting sauces, adjusting seasoning, creating something that didn't need to be shared or justified. Sundays became mine. I deleted the family group chat. Not muted, not archived. Deleted. My phone felt lighter immediately. Then I did something I'd been putting off for years. I booked a solo trip. 10 days. British Columbia. Hiking, photography, no itinerary. I used vacation days I'd been hoarding in case someone else needed help. For once, that someone was me. The day before I left, a handwritten letter arrived in the mail. From my mother. Short, careful, familiar. She wrote that things had gone too far, that Brian and Melanie had crossed lines, that it wasn't the same without me, that they missed me, that I should call. I read it twice, then a third time. I didn't feel relief or anger or warmth. I felt still. The letter wasn't an apology. It was an invitation to step back into the role I'd abandoned, to smooth things over, to make it comfortable again for everyone else. I folded the letter and placed it on my kitchen counter. Then I packed my bag. The trip changed me in ways I hadn't expected. I hiked with strangers who became friends by the second mile, shared stories around campfires, fell asleep to wind and pine instead of the hum of guilt buzzing in my phone. On the sixth day, standing on a rocky overlook with the sun warming my back, I thought, this is what it feels like to live for yourself. Not selfishly, freely. And I knew something else then, too. I wasn't going back. Not to the role, not to the pattern, not to the version of myself that only existed when she was needed. When I returned home, I wasn't healed, but I was whole enough to recognize the difference. And while I was rebuilding, they were unraveling. I came back from British Columbia quieter, steadier. Not in the dramatic life coaching way people like to post about online, no declarations, no reinvention. Just a sense that something inside me had finally settled into place. 10 days without demands had done more for me than years of saying yes ever had. I didn't go home right away. I stopped by my office first. My manager looked up when I walked in and smiled. You look like you actually slept. I did, I said, surprised at how true it felt. That first week back, I was focused, clear. I finished 2 projects that had been stalled for months, stepped in to fix a deployment issue no one wanted to touch, and reorganized a failing timeline without raising my voice once. A few days later, my manager called me into his office and mentioned a senior advisory position that would be opening soon. Leadership, strategy, trust. It felt good, not because of the title, but because for the first time, someone valued me for what I was not what I could cover. Then I checked my phone. Missed calls. From Melanie, from my mother, a voicemail from Brian, and one text message sitting there like a landmine. We need to talk. It's about the house. My stomach dropped. There was only one house they could mean. The cabin. My parents' old vacation place near Cedar Creek. 5 years earlier, it had been on the brink of foreclosure, drowning in back taxes. I'd stepped in quietly, bought it outright, paid for renovations, fixed the roof, the plumbing, the windows. Legally, it was mine. Emotionally, they'd never accepted that. I'd let them keep using it, family holidays, summer weekends, traditions that everyone treated as communal, as if ownership had never changed. I hadn't pushed back then. I hadn't wanted to be difficult. Now that silence was catching up to me, I called my lawyer. "Do you still have the title paperwork for the Cedar Creek property?" I asked. "Of course," she said. "Do you want me to send it over?" "Yes. And can you run a quick title check? I want to make sure nothing's been touched." There was a pause. "Are you worried about forgery?" "I don't know," I said carefully. "But I don't want to find out the hard way." I didn't wait for the results. That night I drove out to the cabin. It was late after 10. I didn't text anyone. I pulled into the gravel driveway quietly and froze. The lights were on. 2 unfamiliar cars sat beside the porch. I parked a little distance away and approached on foot, my heart pounding harder with every step. Voices drifted through the open windows. Melanie was laughing. "She's never here anymore. It just sits empty." "Exactly," Brian replied. "We're the ones who actually use it." Rick chimed in. "She wouldn't even notice if we took over the deed." My chest tightened. "She's changed," Melanie said, "ever since that stupid birthday. Like she thinks she's better than us." "Let's just get the paperwork ready," Brian said. "If she won't sign, we'll say it's for taxes or maintenance. Slip it into a stack. She never reads anything. She never." That's when I opened the door. Silence crashed down instantly. Every head turned. Melanie went pale. Brian's jaw locked. Rick looked like he might be sick. Janine, of course, Janine was there, tried to school her face into something neutral. "Hey," I said calmly. "Cozy night." No one answered. I was in the area, I added. "Thought I'd check on the property I own." Melanie recovered first. "Irene, it's not what it sounds like." "Oh," I said, pulling out my phone. "It's exactly what it sounds like. Want to hear the recording?" Their faces drained of color. I hadn't recorded anything. But they didn't know that. "You were planning to trick me into signing away my house," I said. "You thought I wouldn't notice." "That's not," Brian started. "It is," I snapped. "You just said it." I gestured toward the corner. "See that security camera still active, still backed up to the cloud." Panic flickered across their faces. "Let me be very clear," I said, my voice steady. "This cabin is mine. I paid the taxes. I paid the renovations. And now you're trespassing." Janine opened her mouth. I raised a hand. "Don't." I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. "You can leave," I said, "or I call the police." They left slowly, muttering under their breath, pride bruised, but fear intact. I watched their taillights disappear down the driveway before sitting on the couch, alone in the quiet. Not angry, just awake. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was entitlement. And now that I'd seen it clearly, there was no one seeing it. The plan formed quietly that night. And this time I didn't hesitate. I didn't act out of anger. That surprised me most. In the days after the cabin confrontation, I moved with a calm I'd never felt before, the kind that comes when doubt finally leaves the room. I called my lawyer and told her everything I'd heard, everything I suspected. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "You did the right thing calling me when you did." We filed a notice of interest on the property that afternoon. Any attempt to transfer the deed without my consent would now trigger alarms I wouldn't miss. I upgraded the security system at the cabin smart lock's motion sensors cameras routed through my own server. I hired a local property manager to check in weekly, document everything, and act as a legal witness if needed. Then I started gathering records. Not for revenge, for truth. Bank statements, receipts, old emails, text threads, payment logs. It took weeks to reconstruct, but the picture that emerged was unmistakable. Years of quiet support. Thousands of dollars funneled into other people's lives without discussion, without acknowledgement, without consent. When it was done, I sat back and looked at the numbers. They weren't shocking. They were clarifying. The final piece came easily after that, a trust. One I'd been meaning to set up for years, but never prioritized because someone else always needed something more urgently. This time, I made it airtight. My assets would go where my values lived now. Education, access, mental health services, community programs. Not to people who saw generosity as obligation. I didn't tell my family any of this. Instead, I sent invitations. Handwritten, formal, polite. "You are cordially invited to a family brunch at the Cedar Creek cabin. Saturday at noon. Dress casual. Bring nothing." They came. Of course they did. Brian arrived first, followed by Melanie. Rick and Janine trailed behind. My parents came last, hesitant, like they already knew this wasn't a reconciliation. The table was set when they walked in, real food, fresh coffee, a candle burning low. I greeted them with a calm smile. "Thanks for coming." They sat slowly, eyes scanning the room like it might explain itself. I handed each of them a folder. Inside were the records, itemized, documented, undeniable. At the end of each folder was a number. Brian, 28 for $463.17. Melanie, 41, 029.58. Rick and Janine, 11 $382.90. My parents, $9, 710.33. They flipped through the pages in silence. You kept score, Brian asked finally. No, I said, I remembered. This is insane, Janine muttered. I'm not asking for repayment, I said calmly. I'm showing you what I carried. Melanie's voice shook. Family doesn't keep track like this. Family doesn't exploit, I replied. I let the silence do the rest. Then I handed them one final document, the deed transfer. The cabin now belongs to the Cedar Creek Conservation Trust, I said. It's protected land. No private ownership, no holidays, no access. My mother looked at me, eyes wet. Why? Because peace matters more than tradition, I said. And because I don't recognize this place when it's tied to entitlement. Brian stood abruptly. You're cutting us out. No, I said quietly. I'm choosing myself. They left without apologies, without arguments, without power. When the last car disappeared down the driveway, I locked the door and handed the keys to the property manager waiting outside. All yours, I said. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For years, they believed I was the family wallet. They were wrong. I was the one who built the vault, and I was the only one who knew when to close it.